Hey everyone, it's Horror Free for All, and I hope you're doing well today. I have a movie review of a wonderful little film that came out last year in 2023 that I didn't catch until my good friend Strange Michael, also known as Night of the Living Dude, made a review on it. And I went back and watched it near the end of the year in like late December. And I was shocked that I missed out on this movie because I had a blast with this film. And it ended up being my second favorite movie that came out last year for the horror genre, which is saying a lot. This movie was written by Chris Thomas Devlin and directed by a fellow named Samuel Bowden. And the film is none other than Cobweb. I actually got a full theater size poster from my work because I work at a movie theater. And I loved this movie so much, I wanted to get a poster for it and put it on my horror wall because of how amazing this film was. It does have some issues, it's not quite perfect, but I was shocked, especially given last year, in terms of just films in general, about just how much it was a give and take. You know, you had a 50-50 shot of something being just really abysmal or really bad, or something that was halfway decent to good. And out of the whole horror genre, my two biggest wants that I wanted to be great home run movies, Evil Dead Rise and Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving produced. Evil Dead Rise had a lot of issues, but serviceable issues that still make it a solid movie. But then you have movies like this, which I heard buzz around, kind of like in that August territory of last year, and I just never got around to it. I don't know why. I thought that maybe it was just one of these buzzword type of movies where they just catch a little fire on social media because there's maybe some stands of certain actors. And the actors in this movie, Lizzie Kaplan and Antony Starr, you might recognize from projects like Mean Girls for Lizzie. And for Antony, he's known as, I think, Homelander and The Boys TV show. So I knew that going into it, at least it had some cast ensemble. But what I got out of this movie, man, I was utterly just amazed at the quality of this. This was up there with Thanksgiving, with, I would say, maybe Dark Harvest and Evil Dead Rise as my like solid four favorite films of 2023 in the horror genre. Yeah, I highly recommend that you go check this movie out if you have not seen this before, because this is such a little hidden gem type of treat. So what is the plot about? I was kind of curious to see where this was going because this movie appeared to be in that same vein as I was talking about in my previous review called Don't Be Afraid of the Dark, where you have like a kid carrying the narrative of a movie in that old traditional Are You Afraid of the Dark or Goosebumps way of storytelling, but obviously they're making a more adult horror oriented horror film out of. And that's exactly what you're going to expect here. And this character is even younger than the character from that movie I just reviewed. And the story's about this 8-year-old named Peter. And he starts to, in the beginning of the movie, he starts developing these nightmares around Halloween. It seems like there's like an anniversary coming up of a certain death in the community that you'll find out later on that might be promoting this. It's never really quite explained. But Peter is having these like thoughts or imaginations that he thinks he's experiencing where there's a voice calling out to him from the walls of his room. And the concept kind of reminds me of a Haunting Hour episode. If you don't know what Haunting Hour is, it's a kids horror television series that came out in like 2010, and I think it went off the air around 2013 or 2014. And there's an episode in that show called Walls, ironically, that had a very similar setup to this movie. And in a lot of ways, this is kind of like a whole different take on that episode, but there's a lot of similarities there. So I was like, okay, where are they going to go with this? And immediately you start to see that there's something wrong with Peter's family structure. He has two parents. He's the only child, presumably. But his parents are super morbid and weird. His father seems to be kind of abuse-ish. And I don't mean to laugh at that, but like, you don't really know how to peg his character, and throughout the movie you do get a sense of what kind of father he really is. And then his mom seems to be caring but also overbearing, and might be hiding something, and you can't quite figure out what's going on with the both of them, but you know that something is wrong here. And Peter seems to like show that he has like a really shitty life. And very early on, he goes to school. You know, it's the fall time. There's a rich atmosphere. All the kids are talking about doing Halloween. And Peter knows that he's not allowed to go trick-or-treating because his mom is overbearing. So he gets kind of ostracized at school for having, you know, a weird life, right? His parents, ironically, run a pumpkin patch. And I don't know if they sell the pumpkins to the public there, but that's literally what they grow in the yard. And the house is like old and completely made of wood. You could tell it's been there for maybe over 100 years. It's kind of decrepit on the outside. It's something really fucking creepy about the house. So, nonetheless, you get to meet Peter's teacher, who is named Miss Devine, and Miss Devine is kind of worried about Peter because Peter is having these drawings coming out, you know, during class time where he's kind of fantasizing about these voices in the wall or the voice in the wall that he keeps hearing. And throughout the movie, it's a very surface level plot, so I can't really go into too much without spoiling majority of the movie, but I'll just keep it surface level for this portion here. So throughout the movie, Miss Devine sees Peter drawing these pictures after all these occurrences keep piling on of him witnessing or thinking that he's hearing a voice coming through his wall. And he'll draw some ominous things like "help me" or something like that. Miss Devine doesn't really know how to interpret it. Meanwhile, Peter, as the movie goes along and he starts to hear this voice in the wall, he starts to get talked to by this voice, and the more he gets to know this voice, the voice seems to be a familial, not like familiar, but family kind of character going on, and she may or may not be Peter's sister, right? Or alluding that she is. And there's a lot of exposition dump going throughout the movie where the sister, or what we're supposed to believe is the sister, is telling Peter that she was locked in the walls by the parents and the parents were evil. And Peter starts to kind of see in his little 8-year-old mind that his parents are kind of abusive. And there's certain examples throughout the movie where Peter, because he has a broken home life and he's not happy and stuff, he starts to lash out at school. There's some bullies that we see ostracize him early on. It's a really fucked up scene, but this kid pushes another kid down some stairs, and we see this shot of this kid with a fucked up leg. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, man. I was like, this movie just doesn't care to fuck up some kids. And yeah, if you're squeamish about kids dying in horror movies, brace yourself for this, because what the fuck. But nonetheless, after Peter gets like expelled from school, he has to become homeschooled. Miss Devine still tries to keep in touch with Peter and like leaves her cell phone number at the top of her Peter's last math quiz. I guess because she's worried about him, and she understands after coming inside of Peter's home because his parents invited her in, that something is off and that these parents need to be kind of investigated on a little further. As well as the plot goes along in the story, we start to realize that there was a disappearance that happened a few Halloweens prior, and that's why I mentioned that all these events might be surrounding this Halloween event that happened a few years prior, of this 11-year-old girl named Rebecca that strangely disappeared. And Peter thinks that he might find out the truth of this girl named Rebecca through the voice in his wall that's saying that she's his sister. And he ends up finding like a human skull in his parents' pumpkin patch and realizes that his parents are trying to cover something up. And this is after he was grounded and locked inside of a hidden basement cellar behind a fridge for like, I think, an entire week. And after being abused and all this stuff started piling on, he realizes that it's up to him to ask for help. So he tries to reach out to Miss Devine to get help, but his mom freaks out on him even further. So he comes up with this plan, talking with his sister through the wall. And at this point, the sister has kind of like made a hole in the wall. And you start to realize, like, okay, is this being possibly this Rebecca chick that disappeared? Or is this like the ghost of this Rebecca chick? You don't know. but there's some physical manifestation actually trying to break through the wall, and there's like a physical hole there where Peter can hear the voice a little bit better. And the voice sounds like around like the age 11 or 12-year-old girl. So you think that that might be the thing the whole movie. But as the plot goes along, there's some setup here where Peter's dad early on in the film was trying to like teach him how to set up some rat poison because he thought that maybe Peter was hearing rats in the walls. So Peter sees an opportunity to possibly take care of his parents. And that's as far as I'm going to go. I'll let you all see what happens to them. It's a really fucking morbid thing. But once Peter gets out of that, he has no idea that this kid that he pushed down the stairs that got him expelled from the school, and the kid that broke his leg really bad, has recruited the help of, I guess, his cousins or his older brothers to come like fuck up Peter on Halloween night. And the whole entire climax takes place on Halloween. And essentially, the movie comes to wrap up with this humongous climactic event in the final act, or I guess in the final third of the movie, where Peter tries to free this being, whatever's in the wall, but finds out the grisly truth behind it and some otherworldly things going on. And he has to deal with that, and so do the people coming to his house to fuck him up. And Miss Divine, who got a call from him to get help, also comes into the climax, and you figure out what's going on and what exactly happens. And you kind of figure out the real identity of what's inside of the walls. And I'll leave it there. There's some brutal deaths with some CGI and stuff, but that's as far as I'm going to go. And I'll just leave it there and say that's what you can expect out of the Cobweb movie here. Now, I have a lot of positives with this film. I'm going to start off the bat here. The kid who played Peter, Woody Norman, I don't think I've ever seen this kid in anything, but holy crap, this kid was a great lead for this type of movie. I don't know if he's to the level of like a Bailey Madison in something like Don't Be Afraid of the Dark, but this kid, we got to experience his narrative throughout the entire film, basically, which was really refreshing. And like I said back in the beginning of the video, this is very much in the vein of the traditional Are You Afraid of the Dark or Goosebumps storytelling, to the point where I'm hard confident that you could say that this is a Goosebumps movie for adults. It's kind of like if you took a Goosebumps-like plot, you remove all the silliness and the R.L. Steinisms that make those books more innocent, and you put adult horror tropes inside of it and some brutality, and made a rated R horror film out of it. And I think that, especially in today's genre of horror, or kids horror, I should say, or horror involving kid leads, having the entire film around kid narratives, I would say that this is a better alternative than the mainstream stuff we're actually getting in the family horror genre. I think kids, especially these days that are more desensitized to violence and stuff, might just treat this like a PG-13 type movie. I definitely think, unlike some other films that are kind of similarly tied to what this film, I guess, falls under, this film definitely has more brutality than the rest of them, which kind of sets it apart. The directing in this film was absolutely exquisite. And as the story builds along, you get more and more of that Halloween atmosphere. It's not really rich like some other films that have come out recently, like maybe Dark Harvest or something like that. It's not nowhere near as atmospheric as Thanksgiving was for the Thanksgiving holiday. But for like a more low-budget, small theatrical release, mainly going video on demand release type of movie, this had a serviceable budget, and the camera work looked phenomenal. Some of the editing sequences were beautiful. There's one scene where the whole thing starts out sideways and it comes into focus right when the climax is about to start. And that shift was perfect because it kind of signals the final act of the movie. And I just thought, like, there's certain subtle nuances in this film that are just so commendable. The lighting and the color hues was great. The music in this movie, there's a chilling, foreboding, just simple, like, chime song going on throughout the film. It doesn't get too annoying, but it plays at all of the more depressing notes of the film to kind of send home this uneasiness as it builds up into the final act. And there's some really effective shots in this movie involving like some really good dream sequences, because this kid also has nightmares that involve his parents as well, that kind of feed into the voice in the wall. And some of this stuff was probably in there just to service up some jump scares to keep the audience entertained throughout the movie. But I think for something as simple as this, it wasn't too egregious. The jump scares were effective. And I will say in the final act, we get to see what's inside the wall. I think the design is very creepy. I think it's very unique. I see a lot of people slamming this movie online because of that final act monster. But I dig the design of this monster creature. It's something out of like Alvin Schwartz almost. You would see this stuff in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. It is absolutely breathtaking. And yeah, I would take this kind of monster any day, even over the little troll things that we got. Don't Be Afraid of the Dark or something. This monster was very effective. And I think all the acting in this film was phenomenal. The character, the story building, all that was great. I like the small town setting to it. There's something so synergistic about this film, and it all just clicks. And the film only clocks in right under an hour and a half. I think it's exactly, hold on, let me see how long it is. It is 88 minutes. Okay, so it's like right under an hour and a half. Perfect length for a film of this type here. But I do have some negatives with it, and I'll get them out the way. There is some padding going on in the story that kind of gets in the way. One too many dream sequences, I think, kind of, make the movie feel a lot longer than it actually is at times. It's a lot of repetitive, talking in the walls set up until around the second third of the movie, where it starts to kick on the whole sister stuff. I feel like the first third could have been condensed down considerably. And that's really where a majority of my problems come with this movie, is in that first third, the whole setting up the story. It could have been a little bit neater because of a lot of things just being thrown at the wall, a lot of ideas, like a missing persons case that might be coming into the story. You have a teacher worried about the well-being of this kid. You have a kid going through trauma. You have all this stuff randomly starting around this specific year. Why is it here? It could have been polished up a little bit better in that first third. And then my second little nitpick negative would be in the final act. After the reveal of what is inside the walls in Peter's home, and we get that climax event where Peter is in this harrowing thing, there is a weird way this film wraps up, and I'm not too big on that. I think it's going for that sequel bait thing, but I think that it's a little too biting off a little more than it could chew here. I don't think this movie's going to get a sequel, and I don't think they needed to go that route. Other than that, I thought this film was very well made. I mean, I have to tip my hat and give my roses to let me give credit to the writer again, Chris Thomas Devlin, and the director Samuel Bowden, for making a quality film. And I have to say, this was great, and honestly probably one of the best hidden gems of horror I've come across in the past few years. If I had to rate this thing out of 5 stars, I'd probably give this about a 4.5 out of 5 stars. It's a highly recommendable movie for me. Definitely go buy this for your physical collection. If you want to try streaming it before buying it, sure, go ahead. But yeah, this is a must-own, and I'm glad I own this in my collection. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Cobweb from 2023. Let me know down in the comment section if you've seen this movie before. Do you love this or do you hate this? I'm dying to know, and I'll see you next time.